Okay, good night again, everyone. Let me just take the opportunity to welcome you to tonight's session. Dr. James would come on shortly, but in the meantime, since there's so many of us here, and we normally start at 7:30, I want to take the opportunity to welcome us and to get started, and Dr. James would join us as a little while down the road. Now, tonight we have no stranger with us. We have Mr. Weatherhead. I would like to consider a regular on the TLS podcast. And we want to thank him for being here tonight to look at quite an interesting, I'm trying to find the words, fascinating, thought-provoking topic. This whole issue of what is happening off our coast in the Caribbean waters. And as it is so aptly stated in our discussion topic tonight, tied to Washington or torn from Caricom, the high cost of Trinidad and Tobago foreign policy gamble. As we look at what is taking place so close to us, how it impacts us, and really, how should we be engaging our leaders and ourselves and preparing ourselves for what can happen? Are we preparing for the worst while we're hoping for the best? Or are we going along with the current thought that we always do as Trinbagonians, that God is a Trini or he's a Begonian, so nothing untowards is going to happen? So to take us through tonight's session, and Dr. James will join us afterwards, Mr. Clyde Weatherhead, I want to give you the platform on this fascinating topic we have before us.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
The title that was chosen for this evening session is very interesting. Should we be tied to Washington or torn from Caricom? It sounds like a choice. um, to my mind, if we are tied to Washington and Washington does not support the question of Caribbean unity, then it is not a choice. It means that they are both on the same side of the coin. That if we are tied to Washington in that kind of situation, then we are actually torn from CARICOM. In fact, CARICOM is torn from us. And when I say us, I speak of all Caribbean territories. I just want to go back a little bit so that we can understand what is happening. In Venezuela, there has been, for some time now, a change in the governance of that country that began with Hugo Chavez leading the party that is in government. And on his passing, Mr. Maduro became the leader. For those of us, those who are telling us that this is, in terms of this armada that the United States has sent down to the Caribbean, and which is going to be even further augmented by Sunday, our Independence Day, according to Mr. Rubio telling the US cabinet. So there will be more warships and nuclear submarine, etc., coming down to join the others who are already here. I heard some people on the media saying, in terms of by way of reporting news, that this armada is only 3 destroyers. It is not so. It is much more. And someone today on social media reported that by his observation of the skies over Trinidad and Tobago yesterday, that there would have been some movements in respect of military helicopters of the United States over our airspace. So we have to be very careful. We are two small rocks in a giant ocean, and we are at our closest point, just a few miles off of Venezuela. We are also part of a Caribbean regional grouping called Caricom. And apart from that, we are also members of the Organization of American States, which in some of its provisions is a mutual defense pact, similar to NATO. So that is background. On the 7th of August, which would have been uh, just a few days ago, the United States administration, the Trump administration, again declared that the president of Venezuela is the head of a narco trafficking cartel, which they call cartel of the sun. Well, in terms of, they use the Spanish word to describe it. And they also said that the Venezuelan administration is either supporting or part of this narco trafficking cartel and activity. Having placed a bounty on the head of Nicolas Maduro not too long ago, on the 7th of August, apart from naming him as the head of a drug cartel, the US increased the bounty they are offering for information leading to his capture to 50 million US dollars. So if we've ever watched any Western movies and there were bounties placed on somebody's head, it means they are wanted. So the US authorities say Maduro is wanted as a drug cartel leader, and they are offering people 50 million US dollars for anything that will lead to his capture. That was on the 7th of August. A few days later, the same administration in Washington then announced that it was sending a fleet of naval vessels and some 4,000 Marines, and those vessels included destroyers, nuclear submarine, etc. They were sending this armada down to the Caribbean to combat drug cartels. So if we follow the news, the transshipment of drugs from Latin America through the Caribbean to Europe and North America does not happen only through Trinidad and Tobago. The source of those drugs is more likely to be Colombia than Venezuela. But this armada is sent down, quote unquote, to deal with narco trafficking cartels, and is positioning itself just off of Venezuela. So this buildup started a few days ago, and like I said, is to be expanded by Sunday. The question here is, if this armada has as its purpose dealing with drug cartels, are the drug cartels located in the Caribbean Sea, or are they based somewhere on land, somewhere in Latin America, and they may have actors within Caribbean territories, including from Guyana to Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, etc., going all the way up to Jamaica. So why is a naval armada sent to deal with traffickers and cartels which are not located in the sea? What may be in the sea is vessels like that mini submarine that our Coast Guard extracted some Latin American persons who were transporting drugs from a couple months ago, and into which one of our Coast Guardsmen went when the sub itself, that submersible, was sinking, and we have not seen or heard from him since. So either that, or we know that drugs have been transported by land route up the whole of Latin America, South America, into Central America, into Mexico, into the United States, or by air. So is this armada in terms of the firepower? These destroyers have on them guided missiles, which are similar in function to the missiles that Israel has been unleashing on the people of Gaza for the last year and change. So, do you need a guided missile or 3 ships with that capability, plus nuclear submarine with what armaments we don't know? Do you need 4,000 Marines to deal with the movement of drugs by submersibles, by boats, or by air? If we think that that degree of force is simply for that purpose, I think we would be very naive. Let us go back in history a little bit. Many years ago, the United States declared the Western Hemisphere to be its province, more so the whole of the American continent. And there was introduced what was called the Monroe Doctrine, which declared that the US is the hegemonic boss of the Western Hemisphere and the whole of the American continent, including the Caribbean, and that no other power would be allowed to have any influence in this area of total US ownership. The countries of the Caribbean were colonies of various European powers. And by the end of World War II, the wave of decolonization had spread all over the world, including the Caribbean. And based on that, there are some significant events that took place. During the World War, the Germans had their U-2 submarines operating in the Atlantic, disrupting the sea lanes between Europe and America, I mean, the continent of America, including the Caribbean. So, in exchange for some military hardware, the British agreed to allow the Americans to establish bases in Trinidad and Tobago, at Chagaramas, at Wallerfield, and there is an airfield at in central near Cuba at Camden. So the US created a base in Trinidad and Tobago, a military base, as part of the unity of those countries that were fighting against Nazi and Italian fascism and Japanese hegemonism in World War II. Not only that, the Texaco refinery was established at that time because what the Americans needed was fuel for their military aircraft. Similarly, in World War I, the British were changing over their warships from being coal-fired to using oil. So Trinidad and Tobago had its first oil boom in World War I to serve the British military purposes. We next had an oil boom during the Second World War to serve the United States military purposes. So the question of whether there should or should not be a US base in Trinidad and Tobago, the fact is there has been. And Chagaramas and the other land that the US occupied with a 99-year lease during the Second World War has been returned to Trinidad and Tobago. And there is some understanding that should the US require them, that land, and to establish bases again, there will be some accommodation. So here's what happens. They send down this armada ostensibly to deal with drug cartels. Well, it's like Basil Pandey used an expression years ago of using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. The kind of military hardware that the US has sent down to the Caribbean and just off of Venezuela has to be much, much more than is required to deal with any drug cartel. We are told that the US ships are operating in international waters, and according to our foreign minister, since they are operating in international waters, there's no problem because the United States, as a sovereign country, can decide where its military assets go in terms of on the sea in international waters. So there's nothing for us to be concerned about. Interestingly, a former diplomat and someone who was involved in the negotiations for the development of the law of the sea provisions over the years has pointed out that where those ships are is in the exclusive economic zone of Venezuela. So he questions, are they really in international waters? And even if they were in international waters, why this massive amount of military hardware has been brought down and not dispersed across the Caribbean, but located specifically off the coast of Venezuela? So we have this situation. What is the response? First, the Minister of Foreign Affairs says, well, it's a sovereign country, they could send their ships anywhere in international waters, no problem. We are friends with Venezuela, and we will take a neutral position in this situation. That's what he said. 2 days later, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago issued a statement on her official Facebook page that was 2 pages long. And if you read that statement, or if you go back and read that statement, you will see that what is on 2 pages ought really to have been on 1 page because the second page was simply a repetition of the first. And what did the Prime Minister say? Like the Foreign Minister, she said, well, the Americans are here to fight drug cartels, and we support that wholeheartedly. They're operating in international waters, so nobody in Trinidad and Tobago should worry, and the only people who should have a concern are those who are not law abiding. So, have we seen any missiles in Gaza or fired at Israel by Iran in retaliation for the attacks on Iran? Have we seen any of those missiles distinguish between law abiding and non law abiding people? In fact, the latest attack on a hospital in which several people were killed, and I'm hearing that Trump said, oh, that was terrible. The Israelis have said their target was to get rid of a camera in the hospital. They who have camera surveillance systems all over Gaza, all over Jerusalem, all over the West Bank, were targeting a camera and killed many people in a hospital. So the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, wants us to believe that if for any reason the United States gets into a military conflict with Venezuela, which is 7 miles off the coast of Trinidad at the nearest point, that the guided missiles and other armaments of the United States will distinguish between law-abiding and non-law-abiding citizens. Worse yet, she said also, out of the blue, if Venezuela attacks Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago will allow the US military to use our territory as part of their operations against Venezuela. Isn't it obvious that if the US military operates from our territory against Venezuela, that the Venezuelan military will treat Trinidad and Tobago as a legitimate target for their armaments? And will their missiles and their bombs and whatever they throw at us, will they now distinguish between law abiding and non law abiding citizens, as the Prime Minister suggests? She says that, and the basis on which that is said has a little history. And I just want to remind us, I mentioned earlier the OAS pact that we are part of, which is a mutual defense arrangement in part. And if you recall, there's something called the Shipwrighter Agreement, which allows US naval assets to pursue drug trafficking ships and personnel into our waters, they says with our permission. So if a US ship is pursuing a drug trafficking boat into our waters, are we to believe that somebody on that ship is going to call somebody in Port of Spain and say, hello, we need permission to follow the ship and capture these fellas who transporting drugs? Or will they just tell us, listen, we coming through? Let's be realistic. So the Shipwrighter Agreement was first signed in 1996. Guess who was in office in the government of Trinidad and Tobago in 1996? It was the Pandey administration. The same UNC was in government, and they signed the Shipwrighter Agreement. That agreement has been renewed, including by the PNM at different points in time. So some people are jumping and saying, well, if the Prime Minister says the US can use our territory as part of its military operations against Venezuela, the reason she can say that is because the PNM renewed the status of forces agreement with the United States in December last year, 2024. So now the argument is, well, what the Prime Minister say is nothing wrong with it because it's the PNM who signed that agreement. Well, let us just go back to 2013. And who was in office in terms of our government in 2013? Again, it was the UNC, and it was led by the present Prime Minister. And in 2013, Trinidad and Tobago signed the Status of Forces Agreement for the first time. And it has been renewed since in 2022, 2023, and last year it has been renewed again. And that Status of Forces Agreement permits the US to operate on our territory, and it gives immunity to US military personnel operating in Trinidad and Tobago. So they could commit all kinds of wrongs in our country, right apart from whatever military action they're involved in. And they will have immunity. So these two arrangements, Shipwrighter and this SOFA, Status of Forces Agreement, were both signed by the UNC and have been renewed by the UNC and the PNM since. So the Prime Minister says, well, if Venezuela attacks Guyana, just out of the blue, she says that in a statement about American naval forces in the Caribbean here, allegedly to fight drug cartels. So how does Venezuela attacking Guyana come into the equation? And she says if that happens, the Americans are welcome to use our territory against Venezuela. At least Caracas has a subway. And as you would have seen from Ukraine, and you would have seen in Israel and otherwise, that one way people avoid being killed by military hardware is that they go underground, they go into the subways, they go into the tunnels, they go into basements and so on. We don't have any of that in Trinidad and Tobago. So how is the Prime Minister telling us that the United States can use our territory to attack Venezuela and we will be safe? Will Venezuela just say, all right, America, bomb us to smithereens, we okay with that? And Trinidad is our friend, so you could kill us and we don't mind. It's not realistic. The fact is we are in danger. We are in danger if it comes to that, and we are already in danger once the military buildup of the United States began. You would have heard today on the news that Venezuela has also deployed its naval assets within its waters, just opposite to the US Armada that is out there. So our Prime Minister says two things. We welcome this US militarization of our region because we, small countries, don't have the military assets or the other necessary assets to deal with the drug cartels. So we are welcoming the Americans. In other words, Big Brother is going to save us. Secondly, she says, if Venezuela attacks Guyana for some strange reason, America is welcome to use our country as a base of operations against Venezuela. And she went further to say that she will not be discussing this issue with Caricom and that every country in Caricom can take their own decision on this matter. So some people have said, well, what she said there is against the unity of Caricom. And it is against the spirit of Caricom, and it is not in the best interest of the region to say that kind of thing. So what is the defense to that? The Prime Minister says, well, I am not the one who threw the first blow on that issue. You have a few CARICOM states who are members of an organization called ALBA, together with Cuba and Venezuela and some Latin American countries, who have issued a statement on the American Armada in the Caribbean that was unilateral, just like her statement. So you can't blame her. It's already happening. And tonight I'm seeing on the news that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent is saying that the Prime Minister of Jamaica is probably having some unilateral one-on-one talks with heads in the Caribbean. And so there's been no CARICOM meeting as such to have a common position on this issue. So the question of the unity of the CARICOM cannot be built on the basis of every member of CARICOM having the right to have a unilateral position on any issue, and worse yet, on an issue as serious as this. So if the people who are in Alba took a unilateral position without consulting the rest of Caricom, that is wrong. If our Prime Minister does the same thing, it is wrong. And one wrong doesn't make the other one right. If we want Caricom, if we want a regional body, if we want to recognize the Caribbeanness of our people, then we have to protect the unity of the Caribbean at all times. And more so when a big superpower is using its military might in our region and threatening the peace of our region and threatening neighbors of ours, we cannot simply dissipate all over the place. In World War II, when the Axis countries, as they were called, those major fascist powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, was attacking the world, what happened? The anti-fascist forces formed a coalition, formed a unity to defeat the fascist forces. And that coalition included the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union. So there's this famous picture of the American president, the British Prime Minister Churchill, and Stalin sitting together to deal with the issue of the defeat of Germany. The same, so the question of those who are saying that because of Chavez, Maduro's politics, and some people on the radio this week have been gung ho on these things, that there's all these socialist governments in Latin America and so on. And based on that, um, we can't support them. We can't defend their right as countries. And if we defend Venezuela's right to defend itself against American aggression, you know what they say? Get on a boat and go and fight for Maduro. That's what they tell us on Facebook and elsewhere. I am not someone who has any, I have no relationship with Maduro. I have no relationship with his party. I have no relationship with his government. But his country is 7 miles away from mine. And what happens to his country is of concern to me, because what happens there can affect me, can affect all of us in Trinidad and Tobago. And if we are part of the peoples of the world who want peace, who want an end to wars, we cannot say, well, look at Gaza, Palestine is so far away from us. There are some people who tell us in Trinidad, we shouldn't even be concerned with that. Look what Rowley doing to the country. Forget them people in Palestine. So we could ignore genocide. We can lose our humanity because of distance or because of different ideology. So the principles of peaceful coexistence, of non-interference, non-intervention in the internal affairs of other countries, we should throw them away because we don't agree with their politics, or they're not part of us, they are away from us. So why should we be declaring to the world, America can use our territory if they are defending Guyana, if we are not to be concerned about what could happen in Venezuela? What's the difference? They are both neighboring countries of ours. They are both in our region. And if there is a matter of military conflict, then we must be concerned. But we can't choose one or the other. We can't do as the Prime Minister has done and as Mr. Rubio, who is now both the Secretary of State of the United States and he is also acting as the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. And he sits in his cabinet. And if you look at the video, you see how casually these people talk about countries of the world and they're laughing and kicking and talking about, well, countries are supporting us with this military build-up in the Caribbean and we forming a coalition. Well, you remember in Iraq and Afghanistan and now with Ukraine, the Americans call it what? Coalition of the willing. So they say there's a new coalition, according to Rubio, that is anti-drug cartel. And by the way, remember on the 7th of August, the same administration, the same Rubio said that the president of Venezuela is the head of a drug cartel, the cartel of the sun, which by the way is the only cartel that Guyana named in its statement on the American buildup. So he says there's this coalition being formed that includes a couple Latin American countries, including Argentina, and we know how popular the government of Argentina is, and two Caribbean countries, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. So that is the coalition he says is against the drug cartels. Have we ever heard of the war against drugs being carried out by the United States of America in Latin America? The war against drugs has been a military war in terms of arming governments and also having American military forces involved in Colombia and elsewhere in Latin America. Since when? If not the early 80s, it may even be the late 70s. And if this so-called drug war on drugs was so successful, why is it that the same United States needs to have this amount of military hardware to deal with the drug cartels in 2025? The war on drugs has been largely to attack certain forces in some of the countries of Latin America which were opposed to the existing governments and so on. But the drug trade has not diminished. According to America itself, it has increased. So if the war on drugs has not succeeded in 3, 4 decades, what is so magical about these warships coming to the Caribbean that will deal with it now? We need to be concerned because the presence of the military hardware of the United States not too far from our own territory is a danger. The possibility of conflict between the United States and Venezuela is a danger to us. And it has nothing to do with the speculation I see some people engaging in today that perhaps for the Prime Minister to issue that statement welcoming the US Naval Armada to fight the drug cartels was as a result of a deal with Trump Well, the 15% tariff is still on us. And tonight I heard that the City Post had to discontinue its package service to the United States because another imposition of tax has been placed on packages that are not labeled as documents. So anything other than document, the United States has put another impediment in our way. And some people are suggesting, well, maybe the thing is that they promised the prime minister that if she supports what the Americans are doing, we may get the OFAC license back, and Dragon deal will be on these cards again, and so on and so on. So what was all the noise about ExxonMobil and the Deepwater? Well, I can't say bid wrong. The Deepwater deal that was signed recently on the other side of Trinidad and Tobago. Didn't the Prime Minister declare Dragon dead? So are we to trade our safety, our peace, our sovereignty for a license from the United States of America for somebody else's natural resources? Because I don't know if anybody finds it strange that for us to get Venezuelan gas, we have to get a license from America. It's not America's gas, it's Venezuela's. So the same way that we talk about our oil and gas, meaning the oil and gas resources of this country, Trinidad and Tobago, it is ours. The same oil and gas in Venezuela is Venezuela's. Doesn't matter if it's Maduro, if it's who is the head of the government. It belongs to the people of Venezuela. And how can another country be giving us a license to deal with those resources that don't belong to them? So those who are saying and speaking positively that we should make a deal, and perhaps the Prime Minister has made a deal, and we will benefit because the Americans will deal with the drug cartels. Well, they haven't dealt with the drug trade in 4 decades. I don't think they will deal with the cartels in a few days. So it's not about deals. You don't make deals with your country's sovereignty, with your country's peace, with the lives of your country's people. The question for us is, some people are saying, and there's an article by Dr. Tiwari in the papers today. He says, Venezuelan criminals hop from Venezuela to Colombia to TT, to Guyana, and across the Americas. Should somebody put a stop to this? Governments from Jamaica southwards cannot cope with gangs, drugs, gangsterism, murders, violence, and criminality. So he's repeating what the Prime Minister said. We're too small to deal with it. So we have to welcome America. So he's asking, should somebody put a stop to it? The motivating factors for the United States may not be pure. Venezuela owns 19% of the world's oil reserves. Chevron is pumping oil from Venezuela, and every drop goes to the US. So there's aggressive self-interest at work. But he suggests this is the new frontier, and we should support it because we can't do it ourselves. And on that question, if we keep dividing ourselves in the Caribbean and claiming that we have the right to take a unilateral position on major issues like this, then we can really never defend ourselves. We can never deal with the drug trafficking and the cartels. So Preserving the unity of the Caribbean is an important question. Preserving the peace of our region is an important question. Any military pact like the OS Mutual Defense Arrangement, my view is that we should not belong to those things. And if somebody tells me, well, this is a matter of being practical, we don't have the assets to deal with the drug trade, and then why are we in a state of emergency? And why are we being told that the state of emergency is to deal, excuse me, with crime syndicate in our country? We're getting all kinds of mixed messages coming from the government. But one thing is clear, the government has made it clear. We are supporting the Americans having their military buildup in our region, and we are prepared to allow the Americans to use our territory in any conflict with Venezuela. And somehow, if that happened, the people of Trinidad and Tobago will be immune to the weapons that will be discharged back and forth 7 miles away from us and close to us and against us. Because if the American troops are in our country, they will be a target and our country is a target. So we need to be very careful about these things. This is not a matter of who could help us and who can't help us, and whether we like Maduro, we don't like Maduro, or we love Trump. In fact, the Prime Minister accused us of don't be against Trump, or if you're anti-American, then I suppose the only word she didn't put in that statement is that you are anti-patriotic. But we are on the eve of our 63rd anniversary of independence. And our political leadership is saying to the world that our country is open to be used by a superpower against another country that is our neighbor, that is in our area, that is in our region, and that has not carried out any aggression against the United States. So I don't think that there's anything for us to not be concerned about. And we need to be very, very clear that we have to adhere to principles, we have to adhere to unity of our region, we have to adhere to our right to have peace in our country and to protect our citizens above all.
That's it, Clyde.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And let me say good night to everybody. And I heard most of what you said. So wonderful, clear, and clean uh, analysis of the state of affairs. Um, there are a couple of people on the platform that I think ought to take responsibility for making clear comments on the issues you've raised. I have some questions for you, but I'll wait until uh, those persons have commented. And I want to begin the feedback with Lloyd Taylor. He's been in this business for a long time and has taken a lot of positions about the way the world order should be managed. And I'd like to hear his comments on the statements you've made and his own perspectives on these issues, because I had hoped myself that he would take responsibility for putting together a statement of the kind you've articulated here. Taylor, what do you think of
Uh,
Clyde's presentation, and what are your own perspectives?
yes. First of all, let me thank Clyde for at least recalling the various agreements between nation states, island nation states in the Caribbean and the American government, and also for pointing out that this thing we're facing here this thing we are facing about the Americans' presence in attacking Venezuela for the reasons they're given, which obviously is a very spurious one and a false one. Um, this is just a culmination of a long historical record, in my judgment, that began when William said, "One from time is not." We keep going back to that, but it's not a joke. We are seeing the consequences of that. And he also ignored the agony of the little eight when Sir Arthur Lewis presented a little pamphlet urging him not to abandon the concept of West Indian Federation because of Jamaica. And I think the framework in which we ought to deal with these issues, one framework, which I think is important, is to ask ourselves two questions. What, and answer it, what in fact are the attention of the Americans, and how we should deal. What is the guiding principle that should guide our response? The first question, I think, is that the answer to the first question is it's clear that the Americans, I don't even know they will attack Venezuela, to be quite honest. I have to say that. I think Trump is a deal maker, as he sells himself as that. And he will do exactly, if he has a chance, if the international community allows it, exactly what he did in Syria among the Kurds. Put troops there and take charge of the oil and export it. I think the Americans have seen very clearly there's a vacuum in the region. That these small island states and the governments that lead them can easily be bounced from one side to the other. And I think he's going for 159,000 square meters of land that we call the Essequibo, which has a lot of minerals, oil, a lot of mineral assets. I think that's what he really wants. And if he agrees it belongs to Guyana, then they'll have to pay a price for the American presence. They will say, we have these battleships here, we secure you against Venezuela. And the cost of bringing all these people here is X, Y, and Z dollars. You have to pay for these armed services, it's not for free. And I do think that Kamala understands that. And it is important to bear in mind to consider that Kamala is clearly under the thumb of the CIA, the American CIA. We don't have to flinch from that. It's only possible. The only possible reason why she could be taking what doesn't make sense, the defense of Guyana. It doesn't make sense. She is under the thumb of the CIA and she's doing their bidding. They must have offered her something. I don't know what they offered her. And that brings us to the second part of what I think we need to look at from the point of view of thought about is what it means to the challenge of West Indian sovereignty. And it's very real. It is clear that the culmination that we're witnessing now, as a result of shilly-shallying with the possibilities of West Indian integration and West Indian unity, and so on and so on. It is clear that is the most important, in my judgment, the most important factor we have to face. It's becoming more and more remote because we are fragmented and we don't have a common frontier. The possibilities of a Caribbean or a West Indian Federation. I use the word federation. It could be any form of political union. It doesn't have to be a federation. The point is that is receding, and the American presence with a man like Trump in office going to make it very much more remote. There's no reason, for example, why we can't consider West Indian sovereignty. So the defense of Guyana from the standpoint of West Indian sovereignty. The only reason that we, we lack the imagination, or we have abandoned the possibilities of developing a position on that along those lines, because all these governments are now pursuing their own interests, contrary to the interests of what it means to bring the Caribbean together. And those are my key responses to what is now going on in the Caribbean. And as Clyde indicated, you don't need all I mean, modern technology is such that you could take out all these people who doing drugs by drones. You could do, the whole technology has changed. You don't need all that. If you get an agreement among the governments, if drug is a problem in America, that is not a that is you don't need 4,000 men on all these battleships. So it's an issue that could be done very easily using modern technology. But clearly, that's not the reason. The reason is to create a false narrative, a false flag, as they say, in geopolitics, and take control of the Essequibo. I don't think it's beyond that. Take control of the Essequibo and negotiate with Guyana. They have already very early in the game. They have troops there, but very early in the game, before they have more troops than they have now, they put 600 American troops there in Guyana on the assumption that they're going to build houses, homes for Guyanese people. And that is where we are. That is the reality we face with, and it's a very serious reality. I am sure we had to move this government from office, and we have to educate the population. But all the governments are the same. I've been arguing that all the time. They're no different. And that is essentially my position, fellow colleagues.
Yeah, Clyde, give me a response to Taylor.
Yeah, well, I think we talking from the same page. The question of the Caribbean, the word insularity comes up when you're talking about West Indies cricket team. And we have some sports commentators in this country who, the others are insular, but we could have a Trinidad and Tobago test team. I mean, we're so silly to think we could do that. But the same insularity that they accuse others of is the same chauvinism that they are championing. And when our prime minister, the leader of our government, says, my policy for the next 5 years is to put Trinidad and Tobago first, he's not only playing up to Trump by repeating his language, she's literally saying to the rest of the leaders in the Caribbean, the unity of the Caribbean nations doesn't matter. That is the sad thing about what she said this week.
I have a question I want to put to George Stanley Beard that I want you to reflect on with him, listen to his answer, and then reflect. George Stanley Beard, listen to me. I live in Tobago and Clyde lives in Trinidad. He is very close to the Venezuela border, and we up the road here, twinned with Trinidad. Is it in the interests of the people of Tobago? You are all stalwart in the international government move. Is it in the interest of the people of Tobago for Kamala to take the positions that she has taken, and that she has taken in the way she did, meaning not engaging the society in any serious conversation about what is it she going ahead and do? Is it in Tobago's interest for her to operate in that way?
Well, discussion and good night to everyone. Discussion and dialogue is always necessary. In the home, the workplace, etc. This has more far-reaching implications. This is a region, and there is need to actually acquire the views of your neighbors for the to make such a as it affects all of us. And in terms of the geographic sphere, each other on each other's or in each other's faces or on each other's backs. And Tobago for the longest while has been getting has not been treated fairly in terms of its history. As I always keep saying, we need as a people to have actually looked at our differences to celebrate independence. And we need to see ourselves as a region. There can be no, in God's world, there can be no Caribbean region without the island of Tobago. So that what Britain did by sticking us under Trinidad didn't help, didn't recognize the reality of the situation. It has actually stymied the development of Tobago, and I've always said, yeah, there's some who are quick to say we should just cut ties, line up like Ronald Webster, but that is not the way to go. Federation, yes, and share the views, yes. That's how I look at it, and it's not in. You just kind of mouth out. It's like having a family, and the family has not sat and discussed problems, but one takes it upon his or herself to suggest that this is the way we go. It creates avenues for
Clyde,
censure,
yeah,
etc.
yeah. Thanks, George. Clyde, let me tell you why I asked George the question that way. This hoopla evolved over the last couple of days, weeks. Farley has said nothing to the Prime Minister about how Tobago's best interests should be represented in this whole conversation. Is it, in your view, if you put yourself in the position as a Tobagonian, which you are in any case, is it in Tobago's interests for us to operate in a way that the Prime Minister could put Tobago in the crosshairs in this way, and the Chief Secretary has said nothing about it? Is that the right way for us to proceed?
Mhm.
Well, the fact is, Vanas, that the Prime Minister has put all of us in the crosshairs, and there has been no discussion. I pointed out, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Caricom Affairs took a position that we should be neutral, we should hands off. And 2 days later, she takes a position, nah, I love America, they are glad they come here, we should all be happy they come here. And then her Caricom ambassador, Ralph Maraj, says, well, in this whole situation, what we should be concerned about is restoring democracy in Venezuela. America say we come down here to fight drug lords. You saying if they come to fight drug lords, we should establish democracy in Venezuela. How does fighting drug lords equate to that? And they don't even have a coherent position among themselves in the leadership of the country. And it goes again, I raised the question this past couple of weeks about the notion of sovereignty. That sovereignty, according to British constitutional thinking, lies in the parliament. Before that, it lay with the queen, the monarch. So in our situation, the way our constitution operates, sovereignty lies with the prime minister and the cabinet. But one place it does not lie and where it ought to lie is with the people. So when I referred to 1970 recently, when I asked 63 years ago on how you feel, we're not seriously discussing what has happened to our country under independence. What have we solved? Somebody asked me yesterday, um, so you referred to Max Richard's speech on the 50th anniversary where he said the area of darkness in our constitutional affairs is the relationship between Tobago and Trinidad, and we have not solved that, and we need to solve that. He raised it in the context of unity and so on. This is 50th anniversary, that is 13 anniversaries ago. And I had to reply to the person on an on-air radio program. I said, nothing has happened. Nothing. The UNC came into office, and in 2013, it created a bill that it felt that literally put its view on how the relationship should be, and in support of its political partner in Tobago. And then the PNM came and presented a bill that put its view of how the relationship should be and claimed they had all these consultations with the people of Tobago. So neither of them have any clue about how to establish a free and equal union between Tobago and Trinidad. Neither of them. And unless that is established, and unless we have sovereignty vested in the people of this country, I heard somebody on the radio to one of these talk show hosts, he said, so if Venezuela attacked Guyana and America coming into Trinidad to fight Venezuela, would the parliament have to meet to decide whether to do it? Which part of our constitution or law says the parliament has to do anything about that? The government signed an agreement with America. In fact, it was signed by the UNC and renewed under the PNM. And the government will decide what to do. And I don't even think they have much choice, because if America tell you, hey, we come in there to do so and so, you think somebody who praising Trump and who denouncing Biden and all that kind of stuff for the last while, we to tell them, well, hold on. We are to decide. No. So this notion of sovereignty, this notion of where it should lie, the question of the relationship between Tobago and Trinidad, we have not sorted out anything in 63 years.
But shouldn't I want to press you on that? Should the people of Tobago not expect fairly to lay out clearly for the country and for the Prime Minister what he thinks is in the best interest of Tobago and the country on this matter? Why should he be allowed an escape route? It doesn't have to do with what the Constitution says. He has a people he has to lead. Shouldn't he be required to speak up?
Well, I heard him say in some interview recently that he is the head of the government of Tobago. And if you are the head of the government of Tobago, you ought to be speaking on behalf of the people of Tobago. Similarly, in Trinidad, I am hearing the opposition leader and her African party speaking on behalf of their party. They're not speaking on behalf of me. My MP says she's sick and she's recovering, so she ain't talking to me. There's a stand your ground bill that everybody is concerned about. And the PNM say, oh, the government ain't having real consultations, which they're not having really, because they're having consultation for the party. But the PNM is having no consultation. Has Farley spoken to anybody in Tobago about stand your ground? So these people are claiming to be our representatives and are representing themselves or their parties but they're not representing anybody who they're supposed to represent.
Trevor Isaac, I want us to take Clyde's answer as yes, Farley should speak up. You're a legitimate Tobagonian. Let me ask you a question. What is your take on Clyde's presentation and your take on the responsibility of the THA to make clear to Tobagonians where we stand, where they think we should stand? Trevor, you're muted if you're willing to come in.
Yes, are you hearing me, Vanessa?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, Vanessa. Yeah, good night, everyone. Sorry, I did not hear Clyde's contribution. I came in late. But as far as Farley and Tobago is concerned, I think that Farley, it is his responsibility to speak up for Tobago. He is our chief secretary. He is the person who makes all the decisions. And I think definitely that he should ask the Prime Minister what is Tobago's position in all of this and how the decisions that are taken will affect Tobago in the near future and in and long-term future.
Well, let me update you quickly on Clyde's presentation. Basically, Clyde is taking a position that it is not in the country's interest for the Prime Minister to say what she's saying about supporting America, essentially in its endeavor to threaten and likely invade Venezuela on the pretext about drugs. He doesn't agree with this business of drugs as a legitimate pretext because the problem hadn't been handled for the last 40-something years. And Taylor's point is that you don't need an armada to deal with drug dealers in the Caribbean region and with modern technology available to you. And satellite technology is a big part of that. So he doesn't agree with what the Prime Minister's stance is. What is your position on the stance of the Prime Minister as it relates to welcoming America to bring their military might and use it to threaten the region in principle here, and to mash up Caricom in the bargain?
Vanessa, honestly speaking, yes, I know this is an important issue, but at this time, I really have not been given it, any
Enough
much
thought.
thought. Yes.
Okay.
One thing I know for sure is that history has told us many times that America lies about the reasons for doing certain things. We have seen it time and time and time again. And I'm not sure that I can take America's word for anything that they're saying that they're doing as far as these kinds of attacks on other countries and stuff like that are concerned. So, and I guess that is probably the reason why I wasn't, too much involved, apart from me doing other things.
Right.
Right? I can't take America's word. And if she is naive enough to take America's word, that is the reason why they come in. Okay, and this, from what I've read, I cannot say for sure, but I've read about America being part of a drug running racket. Okay, with Oliver North and these people. I can't say for sure, but I read about those things. So is it that they're really, really seriously looking to deal with drugs, or are they just putting that up as a front so that they can do other things? I don't know.
Yeah. Clyde's answer is it's a front. Clyde, I have a question for you. It's 8:59 now, 9 o'clock. And I want to make sure you tackle this question before we broaden the conversation and run out of time. Trinidad and Tobago is a member of the UN, which is operating under a charter that has two articles I was taught about when I joined the UN system. One is Article 1, which mandates the UN to promote equal rights and self-determination of peoples. And the other is Article 2, which in the context of what is going on here, let me just remind you of what Article 2 of the Charter is about. One component of it prohibits nations to use threats and force in international relations. And another component of it requires countries like ours who are signatory on the UN Charter, UN agreement, to offer assistance to the UN with a view to enabling the UN to advocate for a rules-based order in governing global affairs. And our country is obliged in that context to refrain from assisting other states in their militaristic efforts to inhibit any state, any member of the UN, from pushing to enjoy its rights to self-determination. Those are explicit elements of the charter I was trained on when I joined the UN. And I want you to factor that in to the conversation that you so eloquently put before us here tonight. When we are signatories to these kinds of agreements, won't you say that it should be clear to the Prime Minister that she is violating these fundamental principles of self-determination that the country is signatory to? Isn't that something that really is directly contradicted by Kamala's offer of support to the US to invade Venezuela on these flimsy pretexts that you identified? I mean, the charter is very clear, isn't it? What do you make of that?
Well, the charter has been very clear since the end of the Second World War. That is when the UN came in. So,
Absolutely.
and the whole basis of the creation of the United Nations was to end all wars. So when I hear people like Gary Griffith talking about, well, you know, the reality is we always have military exercises with America. In fact, we had a military exercise called Trade Winds going on while we was going to vote in the last election. Right? So he said they've been here all the time and they've been involved in the war and drugs, and that is the reality. So the reality is what they are doing. The reality is not what is principled. And that is the kind of, you know, transactional and pragmatic kind of behavior that people are following, that literally says, well, if America could kill the cartel people and them, we should be glad because we can't do it ourselves. So the question of the United Nations principles, there's a man, ironically, that this country used to call Duncy. He became the prime minister after Eric Williams died. And 2 years after that, when America was going to invade Grenada, he said, not me, not we. So in that time, several things were happening. In fact, David Abdullah mentioned yesterday that there was a Caricom meeting and Eugenia Charles took her own position and she went off to literally carry out the same role that our prime minister is now carrying out in relation to the United States in respect to Grenada. And some of us actually organized a demonstration at the parliament. And we said, hands off Grenada, which is in line with the UN Charter. And Trinidad and Tobago must not get involved in that. And George Chambers, whatever we may think of him, I'm no fan of the PNM. But the man did the right thing. He said, we're not getting involved in that nonsense. And our Prime Minister now should have had the fortitude to say, listen, we here not getting involved in that with you. And say that to the United States. Instead, she has kowtowed, she has made herself a willing supporter of Trump and his whatever he does. And in that way, she has diminished the sovereignty of our country.
Karen, Clyde opened the door to a question that I was wanting to ask anyway, by raising the issue of Eugenia Childs and her influence in mashing up the New Jewel efforts. Now, look, is there a gender aspect to this thing? You're a wise scholar in the region. Why are we not getting more progressive leadership from our women leaders? We never got it. We didn't get it from Eugenia, and now we're getting this disaster from Kamala. If you think it's a disaster, is there a gender aspect to this thing? You're still on mute there, Karen. If you're, I know you will have something to say on this matter, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it would appear to me as if enough thought was not put into the response by the Prime Minister. And I would think that in a situation like that, and have a discussion with a statement. And I don't get the impression that's national relations.
You're having trouble with your connection there, Karen.
Trinidad and Tobago. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit here and there.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not coming through clearly there at all.
What I was saying is that, all right, let me change my position and see what happens. Are you hearing me better?
Yes, go ahead, and
Are
you're
you
coming
hearing me
through
better,
clearer.
Vanas?
Better now, yes, go ahead.
Right. Okay. I was saying that in a position like that, a lot more thought had to go into the response that was given. And particularly, the situation merited calling the international relations experts together and gathering their views on the issue. The response to me seemed to be a lot less diplomatic than it ought to have been. Whether that emanates from a gendered kind of perspective or not, I am not certain that it has, because had I been in that position, I would depend heavily on the views of the international relations experts to help me to formulate a response. And my response would certainly not have indicated any particular support for interfering with the overall, I would say the overall lack of warfare, lack of threat of war that we have had in the Caribbean. We have not had that kind of threat of war in the Caribbean before. And as far as I'm aware, in my lifetime, it hasn't happened. So it is not gender. I wouldn't call it a gendered response, even though we've had Eugenia Charles having the kind of similar kind of mindless support for the superpower. We've had that, we've seen that. But it has nothing to do with gender, I would think. I think it has to do with the inability of our politicians to practice participatory democracy and to have respect for expertise. I think that is a demonstration of the lack of respect that the politicians show for the expertise of people and the lack of and the inability collaborative approach to policy making, the inability to trust and depend upon those who have studied and have and understand the particular area that you are dealing with. There is that lack of humility on the part of the politicians to depend on the expertise that is available to them when making key decisions. That is what I would call it. Not a gendered response, but
Okay. I would ask Clyde to weigh in on that, but because he's the one who noted that Chambers was running a dictatorship just like all the other prime ministers we've had, but he didn't join in the destruction of the Grenadian progressive effort. Judge Stanley, before I ask Clyde to come back in, what is it you put up your hand to say?
No, because I am, in retrospect, we have come out of a history and culture of not saying very much because things have been handed down to us, and we neither question nor suggest solutions. Our politicians do it to us. Our business community will do it to us. And it followed suit that look, Prime Minister made her utterances. But the question I need is the country isn't run only by politicians. The people are the ones with the power, right? And the people should be clamoring, ought to be clamoring for the politicians, for the business community. I looked at the news tonight. I see where TD Post has suspended parcels being going to the US, etc. But how does that affect us? And we should be the ones who should be opening our mouths, the people, general population, so that the politician has to take the cue from the people. I just can't go recklessly and say we support the US. And it means, how is it going to affect my bread and butter? How is it going to affect my family? But we don't have the independence of media either. And therefore our people remain in a state of ignorance. It is sad that after 63 years, this is what we have landed up with. But therefore, politicians will come and go, and they will see whatever they think is in the interest of them and their parties, and the party politics is again a tool which is awful, with which to develop a society and the people. It is sad to have lived here and to see it to our detriment.
Clyde?
Yeah, well, I agree with Karen that this is not an agenda issue, but I disagree with her that the position the Prime Minister took is due to a lack of time and lack of consulting other people. This is the same Prime Minister who in 2015 went to the 7th Summit of the Americas, and defended the sovereignty of Venezuela and oppose US sanctions. So what has caused the flip-flop is not a gender that has caused that, because there are many people in this country, male and female, who flip-flopping on this issue. The fact is, as Stanley put it, if you're not speaking for me, then what you are saying cannot be in my name. What you are saying is not in my name. It is not in my name, meaning my meaning of the name of the people. And if the Prime Minister took that view because she has a view that Trump is the greatest thing and what America has to do is the best thing, and we cannot do anything without America, then literally, why are you Prime Minister? What are you there for? To do nothing? To simply accept the dictate of Washington? We can't operate like that. It is against every notion of independence that we're supposed to celebrate on Sunday.
Let me ask you this, Clyde. Being elected with a majority in the parliament and so on is not a sufficient basis, you seem to be saying. Taylor kind of hinted at that in a conversation earlier in the week to me. Is not a sufficient basis for her to think she is speaking for us. That's what you're implying.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying.
The fact is, I don't care what majority you have. They keep telling us promises kept. Remember, that was the same language as Trump. If the promises you made are not in the best interest of the country, the fact that you keeping the promises don't mean anything. Nothing positive for the country. It may mean for your ego, well, I'm doing things and I'm acting on the mandate and all this kind of crap. Which mandate did in on the 28th of April, did anybody go in a polling booth to vote to say our country must support America using military force in our region and threatening the peace of our region, and we must give them carte blanche to come in our country and conduct operations against another country and threaten our lives? Did anybody vote for that? Nobody voted for that. So when people get elected, that's when the job begins. As I tell people, well, I can't even say nowadays because historically trade union leaders and even down to our shop steward had more transparency and accountability than a prime minister in this country. Because as a trade unionist, you are acting as a steward, you're acting on behalf of somebody else's interests. And in order to do that, you must have the person's point of view about what is affecting them, and you must report to them on what you are doing. When I became president of the PSA and I restructured the whole PSA so that we would have had a parallel kind of structure to what would have been the implementation of HR units in ministries and departments. That came as a result of what we call a pie chart. I have a whole booklet that we produced out of that discussion. And I had to report every year to the annual conference. These are the plans I put forward at the beginning of my term. This is where we have reached with each one. This is, if we haven't achieved everything, this is why, and so, and where will we go next, and so on and so on. So that is how an elected representative ought to work. But we have elected representatives who do not speak to the people who elected them. They speak to the general council of the party if they have one. And I don't think the UNC has one. And they speak in their executive and they take a position and that's it. And they tell us what they think.
Karen, I see you have your hand up. I want to bring you in quickly before I ask Alston what he thinks of all of this. Just let's hear from you quickly there, and then let's see if we can get Alston Charles to issue a thought for the benefit of everybody. What you saying, Karen?
I have a quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Your connection not great, you know, Karen. You could come in. All right. While you organize your connection and you will signal again. Alston, what you have in mind here? You've been listening to us talk, and I know you are a wise fella, so you have a lot of things to say. What do you have in mind on this matter?
Hi, Vanus,
Yes,
excuse me.
Karen, go
Sorry
right ahead.
about
Go
that.
right in. Go right in.
Connection. I have a quick question, and
Yes.
the question is, do you all think that what is happening now in the Caribbean can trigger in the Caribbean can trigger the third wave? Is there a likelihood
You're
that
coming
it
in and
can
out. Ask the question
trigger
again.
the
I
third
hope
world war?
ask the question again there so Clyde could get to hear clearly what you're asking. Try again.
Is there a likelihood? Are you
Yes.
hearing me? Is there a
Go ahead. Go ahead.
likelihood that
Yes.
what is happening now in the Caribbean can trigger the third world war? Is there a likelihood at all that it can trigger the third world war?
Before I swing back to Olson, let me ask Clyde one time. Clyde, go ahead and answer Karen there, and let me see if I can
Well,
encourage
Karen,
Olson.
there are many situations in the world right now that could trigger a third world war. But the problem is that this is no longer a bipolar world. It is a multipolar world at this stage. And part of the reasons for the American behavior right now, and somebody said it this week, is that they want to make sure that China doesn't have any foothold in the region. And well, they've been carrying that fight for years now. The issue here is that where people are pursuing naked self-interest on behalf of big powers, there's always a danger of world war. And if Ukraine hasn't brought about a world war, and the Middle East situation hasn't brought about a world war, I don't know that this situation will bring about a world war. I don't think it is likely to.
Okay. Olson, go ahead. You're on mute finally.
Yeah, Mr. Vanas, you hear me clearly?
We're hearing you. Yeah.
I think besides we have Caricom, we have the Commonwealth heads of government, and the position that America hold there is a very demanding position, and I find it shouldn't be no pulling and tugging, if America really, because back then in the past, we had a program with marijuana situation in Trinidad called the Weed Eater, and they came down and they cut all the marijuana and they went away. And if now we having a drug problem, what they're saying is cocaine coming from the South American area, I think what we have to do is just as Prime Minister Kamala say, just dress back and let these people play the game, and everything will start. And as we say, there must be a beginning and there will be an end. So we don't have to be standing and knocking we knee and bawling, oh God, oh God, oh God, a war could break out and XYZ, and Venezuela is close to us, and what we gonna do if they start running? Yeah, I don't believe it will reach escalate to that point, Mr. Vanas.
Well, let me ask you a straight question there, Alston. I know you're a long
Go
time.
ahead.
Is this, do you really believe, America, that this armada that they bring into the region is about drugs?
Well, Mr. Vanas, of recent, it came in the news that they already confiscated 47,000 pounds of cocaine. And we, as Trinbagonian grandparents, always used to say, Roach now going foul party. So if the foul and them want to party up there, let them party. We not going out there for them to get the big on our wee back and
So
say,
you really think, Alston, that you need an armada of military destroyers and what have you, and F-16s and so on
well, Mr.
to,
Vanas,
to deal with this issue rather than their Coast Guard, for example? Why
Mr.
do they
Vanas,
need that?
these people has the technological advancement. And what we just say, who have more corn, feed more fowl,
But
right?
you and I have sense, Alston. You and I have sense. You and I have sense to know that if you want to interdict drug dealers, you really don't need to bring the HMS Truman or whatever else they want to call them into the region to do that. The Coast Guard in the American military structure is a
Yeah,
pretty
but
capable thing. Why do you need to bring the 5th Division of so in order to deal with this problem?
exactly. But
Why?
you know
But you
what
tell
we
me.
just
You tell
say?
me why.
Let sleeping dogs lie. Mr. Vanas is more than the mortar in the pistol that a lot of we know is that, right? But we taking it for granted that they say is that. So we dressing back
Well,
and let them do
Clyde
that.
do agree with you. Taylor do agree with you that you could believe America in that way. Let me ask Peter. Peter, you are a wise fella in this business too. You've heard Alston. What is your take on what Clyde has laid out here? Where do you come down?
Oh, the lady come.
Peter, unmute and comment. You are a man with some serious thoughts. It's 9:28 now. You're still on mute there anyway, so whenever you could unmute, come back in. But Kwesi, what you think?
Yeah, good night.
Yeah, Kwesi, what is your thinking?
My thoughts take me back to the Iraq, to the time before the last invasion of Iraq, and what the world was told before that invasion. And we found out subsequently that what we were told was not the case.
Right.
And, you know, that made me very, very wary of the United States government, you know, whenever they want to pursue a certain course of action, whatever they say, it can't be trusted. So that's what I think on that issue. As it relates to the Tobago issue, the chief secretary, even if he, under the guise of national security issues, he could stay silent whilst wearing that hat, he is the leader of a party that has 2 representatives that sit in the national parliament. He's the political leader of a party that has 2 representatives that sit in the national parliament. And I think he owes it to Tobagonians to let us know his party's position on this matter. Thank you very much.
Well said, Kwesi. Let me ask. Let me. It's 9:30 now. Let me see if I could get in a couple of all the other wise voices I see on the platform, uh, before we come back to Clyde to wrap up, and maybe ask Denise if she has any thoughts. Cassius, what do you have to say on this thing?
I'm sure after hearing everybody speak
Mhm.
that there's a threat and a definite threat in the air based on what has been. There's like an open hornet's nest. I don't think we have an idea what really going on. This is about regime change. That is all. Mr. Trump today on one of his broadcasts today said definitely they're going in. There's no two ways about it. It's about regime change, and all the procrastination and all the old talk is a waste of time. They're going into regime change. And it's not about the oil in actually Venezuela. They already have control over that. They are the oil companies running the business there.
Yeah.
It's the oil in the Orinoco they're looking at. Now, I hear Kamala say she go protect Guyana. But if Trump is able to do regime change in Venezuela, he himself will claim the Orinoco as his own, just as he does with Gaza and the Israelis. So that's a big threat there. Kamala can protect the Orinoco, because when Trump get in power, you do business about Guyana and Trinidad. We are very insignificant in this bacchanal here. He wants Venezuela, put in a regime there, and control all the oil in that area there. That is what Trump wants. The dollar is dying. Waste of time. I'm done with that. Thank you, everybody, for giving me up time. Thank you.
Well, you're lining up with Lloyd Taylor, the Cassius. You know, your wisdom is.
Yeah, we know what's going on. We know what's going on. As a matter of fact, I just tell people, I grew up in the PNM ideology. I watch how Eric William handled 1970. I watch how he handled people like the great thinkers that we lost, that he sent away a bit, C.L.R. James, and all those great people that had a sort of Pan-Africanist view that would have helped the Caribbean in a lot of ways. And he distanced himself from that. So he was a neo-colonial in his own way. He didn't have the ideology of having Pan-Africanist view. So he sort of got these fellas out of the way, and he allowed for a future that we have today. Our young people not even aware of what's going on within our society.
But
they don't even understand what happened pre-independence, far less post-independence. We are backward people when it comes to understanding what's really going on.
Mr. Vanna,
America is about controlling everything.
Hold on, Peter. Yeah, let Cassius finish.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We need to get in a place where we can educate our people all about what's going on in the world today. And we're not doing it. Our children are dunce. They're not aware what's really going on. So thank you for the moment. I don't want to take the whole day.
Yeah,
I just want to bring the awareness.
Nice to hear from you, Cassius. Peter, go ahead.
No.
Mr. Vanna.
Is that all, son?
Yes, Mr. Vanna.
Yeah, go ahead.
What we're looking at here, we don't want to speculate, right, on the past condition Venezuela had existed on from Hugo Chavez to Maduro, and whether or not Maduro did lose the election and kept himself as president, and he fought off Guaido, who was the representative from America, Trump's favorite man. Still, we don't want to look at any speculation relating that Maduro loved to hug up Putin and the Chinese man, right? And demand them from Iran, right? we don't want to look at those speculation. What we're looking at is what they propose, right? We still don't want to even look at Venezuela is determined to beat up Guyana for Essequibo, right? Because we still don't want to even say that Essequibo rightfully belongs to Venezuela, and how come Guyana gets so broad when way back down about 25 years we know Guyana as a little strip up in South America, and we ask ourselves, how come Guyana so small and Venezuela and Brazil and these other places to the top of South America is that vast, right? What we taken for granted here as presumption and we accepting is that Trump is stating that this tablet processed drugs and the amount of cocaine that these immigrants is moving to establish the empire in America, right, have to stop. And
all right, Austin. I don't want to cut you off, but it's 9:36. I wanted to hear from Peter before we come back to the
okay, Mr. Vanas.
Yeah, we hear where you're going with that. But Peter, you were trying to come in there a little while. Come in quickly now.
I was wondering if it is me.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
I'm so used to being called Tabiti that I didn't realize that.
Okay, yeah. Tabiti,
I
go
keep
ahead.
scrolling looking for Peter. Anyhow, yeah.
All right, okay.
Well,
remember, I know you both ways.
I know.
Yeah,
I am.
it's
not a problem. It's just that I was.
Yeah. What's your thinking on all of this?
To say, I wanted to say first of all, and I was wondering if Fale is back from New York as yet for the New York Day. I was wondering if he knows what is going on. Some comment was made saying that he should be saying something, but I don't know if he is in a position to do so. And then even if he has something to say, what difference would it make? That is one thing. The other thing is that I was also wondering if Kamala would bust Maduro head with a big stone, the way she's threatening to deal with the ministers. I don't think we have anything to fight anybody with, and that we should really not be heading the way that she is trying to send us. We should just avoid that. And she's really trying to make a deal with Donald Trump as opposed to making a deal with our neighbor. And that is trouble because Donald Trump don't respect anybody. And it is unlikely, especially women, it is unlikely that he would listen to Kamala for 2 minutes. I think I should allow somebody else, but that is my gut feeling.
Hey, that's got the wisdom of a old warlord in the business. Before I come back to Clyde, Akil, I want to give you 2 minutes. It's 9:39. 2 minutes to give us your usual wrap up, and then let me ask Clyde to take the baton and go to the finish line.
I am not usually, good night, everyone. I am not usually fearful. But tonight, I must be fearful. And it is not an irrational kind of thing. It's actually rational. Having seen what took place between Russia and Ukraine,
right,
I can honestly say,
Alston, you have to turn off, you have to put on your mute.
I can honestly say that the possibility of a war breaking out between the United States, Venezuela, and Trinidad and Tobago, somewhere in the midst there, the possibility is extremely high. This is what happened between Ukraine and Venezuela. Before the first shot was fired, there was a standoff on their borders. And for days, almost 2 weeks, 9 days or something, 11 days, somewhere going up there, there was a standoff. And then when the first shot was fired, that was the end of it. We know what took place subsequent. It is real, this, what is happening here, and we ought not to play it down as though nothing would happen. It would only take one happy soldier from either side just to bust one shot, and that is it. So that's my first point. My second point within my 2 minutes is this. There was a Venezuelan girl who always running me down. She liked me bad. I never, paid no mind to her, but every time they invite me to their little gatherings and stuff, I usually go. Yesterday, she told me that she is leaving her job. Her relatives are packing up to go back to Venezuela, and other Venezuelans in Tobago are doing the same. This thing is real. The Armada left from the United States to the coastline of Venezuela was only 3 boats and 1 U-boat. U-boat is the submarine. Subsequent that they sent 4 more they sent. So it's 7 warships, 1 U-boat. This thing is escalating to a proportion where the possibilities of a war, it is high. They are saying they are doing that to curb the war on drugs, the narco trade. I did a little research, and in Colombia, the United States has 7 military bases. Also, in Colombia remains the #1 narco trade territory in the world. Put that in the mix. Let that simmer in your mind for a little bit. If they truly want to combat the narco trade, they have 7 military bases in Colombia. Why don't they start there? There are a number of things that is taking place globally that the members on this chat would have touched on, except one thing. Many years ago, America was at the top of the pecking order in global trade, politics, even in military standing. Well, actually, they're still #1 in the military standing. But currently, they are being knocked down every week. They are losing a notch in trade, political standing, and that worries America because there is a global reset. And on the other side of that global reset, America wants to come out at the top of the global pecking order. To lose that when you were at the top of the global pecking order, the leader of the world, would be a devastating and embarrassment, a shame to their political standing and their economy. I am saying tonight that this is my findings, and I would be going to the supermarket to get my bale of flour, my bale of peas, my bale of rice to put it down, because the possibilities of a war, it is high, and I will not take it lightly. And even though if nothing comes out of it, I am saying America's enemies would become Trinidad and Tobago's enemies on the other side of this conflict.
All right,
Thank
your
you
2
very
minutes
much.
up there. Your 2 minutes up there, Akil. Thanks much. Clyde, if this was an election, you would win in a landslide. So go ahead and wrap up now, and let me turn over the platform to Kay. If this was an election, because you forged a consensus here tonight with only 1 vote against you, so you would win a landslide.
Well, let me
Clyde,
Yep.
excuse me, just before you go there, I just want to add to what the gentleman just said, that should there be a war erupting in the Caribbean between Venezuela and America, it is not going to remain between Venezuela and America. I can see Russia and China getting in there, and whoever else wants to come in on the American side, and I can see a real serious conflagration in this area. So I think what we have to be doing is protecting the peace of the region. Caricom has to stand together to protect the sovereignty and the peace of the region. Without, in a sense, without judging America or judging Venezuela, we need as CARICOM to protect the sovereignty and
But
peace of the region.
That's a
Mr.
World War
Vanek,
III point. Holston. You can't come in there again because we wrapping up.
no, it's a small,
Your
small
time up.
thing. A
Yeah,
small, small.
quick.
Everybody only balling CARICOM. But why they're not saying Commonwealth heads of government?
All right,
Why?
okay. All right. You have your time run out tonight. So next week show up next week and speak up. Bring all your points for
Okay.
next week.
Okay.
We're gonna open the floor for you early. Clyde, wrap up the quickness so we could give Kay a chance to close the session.
I let me thank Akil for what he said. During the course of this whole situation, there's a guy who put on his social media page a position where he says, nothing ain't going to happen, man, because you see them 4 thing there, and 4,000 men is not enough men to take over Trinidad and hold it. But let's to take over Venezuela. I wonder if that man remembers that when they bombed the nuclear sites in Iran, the planes take off from California. America don't need no troops, right? No military hardware right next door to somebody to attack you. And as Akil pointed out, they have bases in Colombia, which is on the other side of the border. And they have bases in other places in South America. The question here is, we have to deal with what we have to deal with. We have to look for ourselves, our position. It is not about supporting one or the other. And so whoever mentioned about Maduro and election and all that hasn't even been raised here. That is not an issue for us. That is an issue for the Venezuelans to deal with. If we have an election in Trinidad and Tobago, are we going to be happy that somebody else somewhere in the world, because of military might and big power behavior, going to tell us who win an election? We wouldn't accept it. So why are we trying to be part of imposing it on Venezuela? We cannot do that. If we respect the rights of other sovereign countries, that is the way our sovereignty will be respected. And it will not be respected if we go to support a big power against anybody else. And that is the basic thing about this. This is a question of saying, America, keep your damn hands off of Venezuela, off of anybody else. And what the Prime Minister has said is not speaking in our name.
Terry and Basil and so on. My apologies that we run out of time. So it's 9:49 now. I want to give Kay the platform to wrap up the session. Kay, apologize to Terry and Basil for me. But you know how it is. We only have 2 hours.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. James, for moderating tonight's program. And again, let me apologize to those persons who were not able to put forward their positions tonight. We will be on next week. So come on next week. And part of the thing is to come on early so you could get your say in early. Clyde, I want to thank you so much for tonight. It was an education to me on some of the things you brought forward in terms of the different the treaties that we are part of and what they meant. And I want to thank those of you who shared on the platform because it brought tremendous education to us. What it is saying, as Clyde said, sovereignty is at the heart of the discussion we are having here. And the thing is, can we take at face value what another country wants to dictate, especially when it comes to superpowers, when they want something done? It is never in the interest of anybody else but themselves. So we, as Caribbean people, need to ensure that we remain as a united Caribbean people and not as fragmented individual territories because we are so small. We need to ensure that we strengthen a Caribbean bloc, even if it's a Pan-American, Pan-African Caribbean bloc. Sorry, we need to strengthen that. We can't be seen as fragmented, especially in a world where superpowers are flexing their muscles more and more. So I want to thank for a discussion. What is part of my concern is that our young people, I'm not sure if we understand fully what is at stake. One, and two, that we as Trinbagonians, God ain't no Trinbagonian, he ain't no Trini. We have been spared many times when disaster comes our way, whether in hurricane or whatever form, and it diverts from us. So we say, nah, nothing bad ain't gonna happen. So I am worried that we are not seeing the true danger that is lurking around us in this whole situation because we figure like most things, it would pass. So we really do have to engage one another as to the seriousness of what we face and have a position. So I was glad when Vanessa raised the issue. Where is the voice of our chief secretary on Tobago's position in this? And has that been articulated to Port of Spain? Where are our representatives? Are they really speaking for us, or is it a party position? Did our votes really give them the license to make decisions that are not in the interest of us as the people on the ground? And therefore, it requires the people on the ground to be saying something. So I want to thank all of us for being on tonight. It's a sober discussion. It should not finish here. And I believe it's a discussion that we need to, on other platforms, in other circles, raise the awareness so that if we are sleeping on the issue, we can really wake up to the seriousness that is facing us in this time and this hour. So guys, thank you for being on the platform. I look forward to seeing you next week. And let us keep this conversation. This conversation is not a partisan conversation. It's a people conversation that we have before us.
Thank you very much, Kay. Let me say that you are speaking on behalf of Denise because she has cockroach in her throat tonight.
Yes, I recognize that.
She can't say anything tonight. She have flu and all kind of things.
So
I never knew medical doctors used to get flu, but you know
they do
get flu. All right. So thanks very much to everybody. Good night. Wonderful session. Let's come back next week with another rich session. And Basil and Terry, we will call on you first next week.
Okay, guys, have a wonderful night. Until next week.
Everyone.
All right. Good night.